All right, welcome back to the Real Media Observer. Dave here, along with my good friend, James Roguski. And I like to say his last name correctly. How are you, James?
I'm doing great. I got a little bit of news on all kinds of stuff. And so what you want to talk about, Dave?
First of all, I like the haircut. Looks great. I do think that people are interested in what's going on with the WHO. And I think you've been on really the tip of the spear on this and broke this story. A lot of people are taking your story and running around with it. But I guess you have a news story for us now, which I appreciate you coming here first. So let's hear what's going on.
Just to recap, wonderfully good news out of Geneva from the last week of May. It began already 2 weeks ago. The amendments that the Biden administration had proposed just went down to sheer and utter defeat. They did not even get considered. They were just kicked to the curb. They were left hanging at the altar. The bridegroom didn't show up. They got stood up. They got invited to the prom, but the date never showed. But strangely, what happened was a replacement or a different set of amendments were put forth by a group of nations, including the United States. So what happened during that week was, there was rumbling that they were having difficulty achieving consensus, which is fancy diplomatic talk for somebody said, "What in the hell do you think you're doing?" And so on Tuesday, May 24th, a new set of proposals, amendments were put forth, and that triggered a whole debate. And then on Friday, a amended version of the amendments were put forth, and they ultimately ended up approving those. And much to my surprise, it was the cherry on top of a complete and total victory, because those amendments that did get approved were actually taking sovereignty and control away from the WHO and giving it back to the countries. They're actually able to sort of do like a line item veto if there are any future amendments. And so it was just an astonishing, complete and total victory for, the power of the people. And it has been astonishing, Dave, to watch the media absolutely butcher it. Okay. I did have one person, call me up and say, "James, I'm trying to understand this, and I'm still waiting to get word from the article that they write." I'm not going to name names because I'd like for these folks to be my friend, but they write things and they publish things, and it's like, do you guys ever call a source and verify the data that you're putting out, or do you just love putting out things that are clearly in error, right? And so, interestingly enough, what I've been saying for the last 2 months, and kudos to you for having me on 2 months ago or whatever it was.
That's right.
For the longest time, I'm saying, hey, folks, I'm not talking about this thing that's called the pandemic treaty. I was talking about amendments to regulations. I thought I made that clear for 2 months, okay? And all everybody was saying was, oh, they're going to be voting on this pandemic treaty in May. And it was just astonishing how, the media, both mainstream and alternative media, just couldn't get it in their head that there's two you know what it is? It's geometry class, Dave. And I don't know how good you were in geometry, but you got geography, geometry, it's all kind of similar, right? Parallel lines, right? They don't cross, they just keep going. And so there's a line for the amendments. There's a process for the amendments to the regulations, and there's a line for negotiating the pandemic treaty. And never, it's not east is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet. But neither of those two things are, to be cross-pollinated with each other. But that's what the media has been doing. And so the latest news is, oh, great, we don't have to worry about the pandemic treaty. They voted it down in Geneva. And holy crap, people, that's what we're talking about. It's June. Remember back in March and April and May, I said, hey, I'm not talking about the pandemic treaty until June. Hey, Dave, what month is it? It's June. We're talking about the pandemic treaty. So after having all that wonderful good news, June 1st, I got some sort of insight in my head that said, oh, you got to go check and look and see what you can find on the WHO website, which is kind of how this all started.
Yep.
So I go poking around and I find a footnote on page 2 on some obscure document about how they're planning to take over the world. And it says, oh, by the way, we're canceling the public comment period that we had scheduled for the middle of June.
Right.
And so it's like, oh, you sons of bitches, right? It's like, so what I ended up finding was that we had done this kind of comment period back in April, and I think you helped, spread the word about that way back when.
Yeah.
And they finally admitted that in like 5 days, we got 36,000 people to put in their written comments. This was back in April. I actually got to talk for a couple of minutes, on a Zoom in front of their assembly. And of those 36,000 comments, they said that the majority of people said, we don't need no freaking pandemic treaty, right? So people were asked to comment of what should be in the pandemic treaty, and they said, well, there really shouldn't be one, okay? So the WHO's solution to that was, we don't need no freaking comments, right? And so they canceled the comment period. They put out a document of what they plan on doing, and it's just astonishing. It's let's just list everything possible that we could think of to rule over the world.
Yeah.
And so if people want to know what's going on, just go to stopthewho.com, and it's almost easier than what we were doing the last month, because that was a whole bunch of confusing, detailed legal amendments and all that sort of stuff, constitutional stuff. This one's just, do you want to maintain your freedom, or would you like the WHO to rule the world?
Yeah.
I don't know, Dave. I'm coming down on freedom.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate the update. So going forward, we still have to kind of keep our eye on this, and it's never over until I don't know when. I mean, the new normal, I think, includes always having to kind of look over your shoulder and worry about what the WHO is thinking about doing. But for the time being, you feel better about things, or just summarize for us here.
Oh, and absolute victory followed by absolute deceit, which just clearly indicates what they're really, really, really all about. So it's just something that I think it's actually helping to wake people up, because the obviousness of it is just so blatant. Okay. Oh yeah, we want inclusivity and transparency, and we're just canceled that public comment period until after August 1st. So let us write the treaty first, and then we'll ask you for your opinion. Okay. So that's where we are. They're supposed to have a meeting. They have 2 subgroups, subgroup A and subgroup B. Subgroup A is going over pandemic prevention and preparedness, and subgroup B is going over response and recovery. And when you actually look at the document, the items listed are the same for both groups.
Yeah.
And it's just like, come on, people. It's just a bunch of words that they're going to put on paper. It likely doesn't have a snowball's chance, in hell of ever passing through the Senate. But I've learned to not take anything, for granted. I mean, anything can happen, but stay tuned. They're not allowing us to comment. So I put up a page, on stopthewho.com, and I'm asking everybody to vent their spleen, or dump their bile, or whatever it is that you do to get it out of your system. And go to stopthewho.com and give the world your 2 cents, and say what you think, because that's one of the things I learned this past month is people really just want to be heard. And thank you for listening, Dave. Thank you for putting it out there.
Well, my pleasure. I mean, I think we were first over here, and then I saw you popping up in some pretty interesting places.
I think the reason I popped up was, my number still is 310-619-3055. And so 310-619-3055. If you missed it, I've gotten well over 1,000 phone calls. And
Wow.
so I've, tried to call back just about everybody. I've probably missed a few people in the rush, but
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful people from all over the world. Certainly a lot of, majority from America. And people just need to be heard.
Yeah.
And that's just not happening on every level. So
Yeah.
thank you for listening.
Thanks, James. We'll look forward to updates on this topic, and we will talk soon, brother. See you.
Thank you.
See you then. Yeah.